This weekend, I'm celebrating the 50th anniversary of my ordination to the priesthood. I was ordained on Saturday, May 27th, 1972. We had a parish mass and reception last Sunday, and I was planning on kind of recycling parts of the homily that I gave last Sunday for this mass. However, the horrific events of this past week, with the slaughter of the innocents taking place again, this time in a primary grade elementary school in Texas, requires us to take a step back and reflect upon how our faith can in any way help us deal with this senseless tragedy. Last Sunday, I referred to the text of two songs in my homily, and I will do that again, using one of them and then a different one. The first one being what I talked about last week, a song I learned when I was in the 4th grade at St. Mary's on the Hill School in Lancaster. I sang in the children's choir for daily mass, and the choir was directed, I think I remember, by Sister Marie Joseph. Somewhere along the lines, she taught us the hymn, Spirit Seeking Light and Beauty, and it has been my favorite hymn ever since. The text of this hymn says, Spirit seeking light and beauty, heart that longeth for thy rest, soul that asketh understanding, only thus can you be blessed. Through the vastness of creation, though your restless thought may roam, God is all that you can long for. God is all his creatures' home. Taste and see him, feel and hear him, hope and grasp his unseen hand. Though the darkness seem to hide him, faith and love can understand. God who lovest all thy creatures, all our hearts are known to thee. Lead us through the land of shadows to thy blessed eternity. Kind of a heavy text for a 4th grader, isn't it? I think that what I fell in love with was the lilting Irish melody. It was several years later when I was studying theology at St. John Vianney Seminary that I began to understand the meaning of this hymn. I was in a discussion group that was reading the Jesuit theologian Bernard Lonergan's massive book, Insight, A Study of Human Understanding. The two most important things I took away were Lonergan's premise that every human person has within him or herself what he called an, quote, unrestricted desire to know. In other words, we're always seeking to understand things. And secondly, in the search for understanding, we are always, or should always, be asking questions, because every question provides us with some provisional answer. But more importantly, every question will carry us to the next question. So we should never be afraid of the questions, no matter how hard or how demanding. And that brings us to today and the questions that are burdening our hearts and choking our throats. How could such a horrible thing happen to such innocent children? Where was God while all this was happening? How could God allow this to happen? These are the same questions whenever we confront tragedy, especially tragedy that is brought about by violence. We ask these questions after the destruction of the Twin Towers over 20 years ago. Shortly after that, Stacy Randall wrote a poem about where God was during this tragedy. It is entitled, Meet Me in the Stairwell, I Was There. You say you will never forget where you were when you heard the news on September 11th, 2001. Neither will I. I was on the 110th floor in a smoke-filled room with a man who called his wife to say goodbye. I held his fingers steady as he dialed. I gave him the peace to say, honey, I'm not going to make it, but it's okay. I'm ready to go. I was with his wife when he called as she fed breakfast to their children. I held her up as she tried to understand his words and as she realized he wasn't coming home that night. I was in the stairwell of the 23rd floor when a woman cried out to me for help. I've been knocking on the door of your heart for 50 years, I said. Of course I will show you the way home. Only believe in me now. I was at the base of the building with the priest ministering to the injured and devastated souls. I took him home to tend to his flock in heaven. He heard my voice and answered. I was on all four of those planes in every seat with every prayer. I was with the crew as they were overtaken. I was in the very hearts of the believers there, comforting and assuring them that their faith had saved them. I was in Texas, Virginia, California, Michigan, Afghanistan. I was standing next to you when you heard the terrible news. Did you sense me? I want you to know that I saw every face, I knew every name, though not all knew me. Some met me for the first time on the 86th floor. Some sought me with their last breath. Some couldn't hear me calling to them through the smoke and flames. Come to me this way, take my hand. Some chose for the final time to ignore me, but I was there. I did not place you in the tower that day. You may not know why, but I do. However, if you were there in that explosive moment in time, would you have reached for me? September 11th, 2001 was not the end of the journey for you, but someday your journey will end, and I will be there for you as well. Seek me now while I may be found. Then at any moment, you know you are ready to go. I will be there in the stairwell of your final moments. Signed, God. For me, the most powerful line of that poem is, I did not place you in the tower that day. You may not know why, but I do. Does God know that these tragedies will take place? And if so, why does God allow them to take place? Because God has handed the world and all that is in it over to us, and he does not interfere. God does not have a script that he has written for each of our lives. God has billions and billions of scripts that he has written for each of our lives, and God gives us the freedom to live out any of them. But we cannot live out all of them. And so with our free will, we make choices. And with every choice, we make dozens or hundreds of those scripts fall away, and they will never be realized. Choosing what path to take eliminates other options and other futures. We can choose paths of goodness and grace and journey closer and closer to God, or we can choose paths of evil and sin and move farther and farther away from God. But the choice is ours. God knows the consequences of all those choices, but always gives us the freedom to choose. All too often, the choices that some people make can lead to the destruction and death in the world. Still, can't God do something? He already did. He sent his beloved Son to die on a cross and be raised up so that we have the ability to bring peace and love and healing into the world if we choose to do so. Or by our lives, the world can be a darker, colder, and more painful place. It's up to us. During this Easter season, the second scripture reading every Sunday has been from the last book of the Bible, the book of Revelation. Our second reading from Revelation today is from the very last verses of the Bible, and they are an invitation that we heard to come to the heavenly Jerusalem, where all the struggles of our lives will be over and all the questions of our hearts will be answered. Jesus promises that he will send the Spirit who will be with us, and this Spirit will enable us to continue to experience Christ's gift of peace. Peace not just for ourselves, but for the world. Peace that the world so desperately needs. Peace on Jefferson Avenue in Buffalo. Peace in Texas. Peace in the Ukraine. Peace in our city streets, in our homes, and in our broken hearts. In that glorious New Jerusalem, the book of Revelation describes, as the medieval mystic Juliana of Norwich promised, all will be well, all will be well, all manner of things will be well. Perhaps for us not now, but someday. But for those tender little children and their teachers, all is well right now. And so the words of a second song, not to be sung, but to be prayed. A song written by the Scottish composer John Bell after the 1996 shooting in an elementary school in Dunblane, Scotland, entitled, There is a Place. There is a place prepared for little children, those we once lived for, those we deeply mourn, those who from play, from learning, and from laughter cruelly were torn. There is a place where hands which held ours tightly now are released beyond all hurt and fear, healed by that love which also feels our sorrow, tear after tear. There is a place where all the lost potential yields its full promise, finds its true intent, silence no more, young voices echo freely as they were meant. There is a place where God will hear our questions, suffer our anger, share our speechless grief, gently repair the innocence of loving and of belief. Jesus, who bids us be like little children, shields those our arms are yearning to embrace. God will ensure that all are reunited. There is a place.